what's going on, everybody? I'll say good morning, but it is late night here at Lincoln Financial Field. The Eagles are now 6-1 following their, I'm going to say, blowout win. Even though they only won by 10 and it was kind of tight at the beginning, I think it was a blowout win, and we have a lot to get into tonight, obviously. Carson Wentz, the big win, where they stand in the playoff standings. Is the Super Bowl realistic? The injuries. But I think the first question we have to talk about is, Matt, would you still take Khalil Mack over Carson Wentz?
Never in a million years. And I think that what you saw tonight was Carson Wentz authoring his MVP resume. And I think that if we're looking at this across the NFL, 7 weeks into the regular season, Carson Wentz is the leader in the clubhouse for MVP. And, Eliot, there were two plays that really jumped out. I mean, we can talk big picture about Wentz in this game. We can talk about big picture with Wentz in this season on later podcasts. But the two plays that really jumped out at me were the play where it was in the third quarter and Wentz is basically sandwiched in the pocket. He steps up and he throws the ball on a rope just to a spot in the corner of the end zone. And rookie running back Corey Clement goes up, hauls it in, makes an acrobatic catch in traffic, gets both feet in for the touchdown. That was a throw that reminded you of Donovan McNabb checking his watch with the throw to Freddie Mitchell against the Cowboys in 2009, like Randall Cunningham bouncing off Giants linebacker Carl Banks and making the throw to Jimmy Giles in the end zone back in 1988 on Monday night at the Vet. That was one of the more memorable throws you're gonna see, and I talked to Mason Foster about it after the game. He said it's devastating. He said plays like that are backbreaking for a defense, and the other play was the 17-yard scramble.
Yeah.
It's third down, and Wentz you're looking down at your typewriter, your keyboard.
Typewriter.
Tim McManus is next to me looking down at his keyboard, and I look up at the screen, and Carson Wentz somehow comes out of this mass of humanity with four Redskins defenders in the backfield, scrambles for 17 yards. Those are plays you don't see quarterbacks make.
And you know, this is why it matters when everyone talks about the NFL Combine and, you know, how much do these measurements matter. Yeah, some of them don't. But what you saw with Carson Wentz is it matters that he's 6'6", 6'7", 230 or whatever he weighs pounds of basically solid muscle. I mean, not to get his legs are like tree trunks. I mean, this dude is so strong, and you could see it on that play. I mean, he's bent over. He's got 3 or 4 guys trying to bring him down, and he stays up and makes the play. So yeah, I mean, I think you saw a lot from Wentz physically tonight that was impressive, but to me, the biggest thing that I saw from Wentz tonight was mentally, and we'll talk about the team in general showed this, but I thought mentally you saw a team and a quarterback that was able to withstand really an absolutely terrible start to the game. I mean, I know we both picked the Eagles to win.
Yep.
But I'll admit, like at the end of that first quarter, I thought, all right, well, this is that clunker we've been waiting for. They start the first drive off. They have 3 straight penalties. I believe it might even been 4.
4 in the first 5 plays. They're backed up to the 2-yard line.
Right, 1st and 36 or something crazy like that. And then Wentz throws, in my opinion, maybe his worst pass of the season. People can say whatever they want about essentially it's a punt because it was third down. That's fine, but it was still a really poor decision by Wentz. And it reminded me of last year. Throws you would see from him not only in the game but in training camp when he was a rookie, where it looks like he just whips it down there with just basically praying that someone's going to catch it. I thought that's what happened with his attempt at Torrey Smith. He throws in a double coverage. It looked like maybe it was a miscommunication or Torrey Smith lost it, but it was just a really ugly interception that set the tone for a really ugly first quarter. I mean, the Eagles only had 29 yards of offense in the first quarter. They're falling behind 3-0. That turns into a 10-3 deficit, and it didn't look good. I mean, The Eagles receivers were not getting open. The defense was struggling. They were committing stupid penalties. And then I thought this game really turned around with that 64-yard touchdown pass to Matt Collins.
But the defense, to their credit, even as the Eagles' offense was struggling, they bailed the offense out. I don't think the Redskins had a third down conversion until very late in the second quarter, maybe even the third quarter. And you want to talk about Wentz. He goes from his first quarter stats being 1 of 13 for 13 yards and an interception, a passer rating of 8.3. So not good by any metric whatsoever. And he comes back and by game's end. And I think, Eliot, this was really a microcosm of this entire team, because this team is developing a mentality of resiliency. They've been able to withstand adversity at every turn, whether it's injuries to Ronald Darby, injuries tonight, which we'll get to Jason Peters and Jordan Hicks, the penalty barrage last week against Carolina, 4 penalties in the first 5 games. They've overcome adversity at every turn. And tonight, Wentz embodied that, finishing after that 8.2 passer rating in the first quarter, 17 of 25, 268, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick, and a passer rating. Get this, 126.3.
Yeah.
So all through his rookie year, you didn't see Wentz throw a 4-touchdown game. Now twice in the last 3 weeks, 4 touchdowns tonight, 4 touchdowns against Arizona. And I think this was even more impressive because this was your toughest test within the division. This was your closest foe in the NFC East. And Wentz went out there and put on a clinic for about 3 quarters.
And I mean, now, 7 games into the season, he's got 17 touchdowns, I believe, to 4 interceptions. And before the year, me and you talked about what would be realistic expectations for him this year. And I said just based off of what you look at traditionally what second-year quarterbacks do, 25 touchdowns to me was the standard. And you said 30. He's obviously going to – it seems like he's going to come closer to that. But I don't think we should overlook the fact that because he's going to pass 25 yards, that doesn't mean that was too low of a ceiling. That just means he's going to blow that ceiling out of the water. I mean, he is playing at a level not a lot of second-year quarterbacks play at. And it isn't just – the 17-yard run's impressive. It isn't those type of plays. It's just how calm he is in the pocket. How, like you mentioned, when they fall behind early, it was ugly here at the Link. People were very upset. It doesn't let it rattle them.
They were about to boo. You felt like the fans were restless, and to their credit, they stuck it out with the offense. It didn't get ugly down here, but you could feel that tension building. And then all of a sudden, that 64-yard bomb, and Lane Johnson said after the game that was the spark that ignited the offense. It turned the tide for the team, and it really turned around Wentz's entire night.
Yeah, and so, I mean, in the locker room afterwards, we're both doing our thing, talking to different players. At one point, I'm talking to an Eagles employee, and we're just kind of standing there and being like, I can't believe, this is crazy. The team's 6-1. They're maybe the best team in the NFL. And we're just, I'm saying, yeah, there's a lot of things that make it happen. He's agreeing. But then we both kind of say, let's be honest here. Carson Wentz is a huge reason this team is 6-1. Yeah, the defensive line's playing well. Malcolm Jenkins having a very underrated season. Lots of different things. This team is 6-1 because of Carson Wentz. There might not be, there's probably 2 or 3 other quarterbacks in the league, but what he's done for this team, not many other quarterbacks would have this team at 6-1, which is why I ask you, I know you have your quarterback rankings coming out on Wednesday, but how many, the literally only person I can think of that would be ahead of him in the MVP discussion would be Tom Brady. Can you think of anybody else?
I think Carson's the leader in the clubhouse in the MVP
Maybe Deshaun
race.
Watson. I don't know what their record is off the top of my head.
I think that Brady has the pedigree, and I think that New England is on a march to the Super Bowl. But it seems like Carson Wentz and the Eagles are on a collision course with Brady, Belichick, and the Patriots.
And I think one of the things
because of Wentz,
right? And I think one of the things you have to take into consideration when deciding the MVP is Patriots were expected to be good. People talked about them going 19-0.
Yep.
The Eagles were a borderline playoff team, and they might breeze to the first to number one record in the NFC and have a first round bye. So and it's all because of Wentz. So I think at this point, I wrote it after the game, he has got to be considered the favorite to win MVP at this point. Now it doesn't mean he's going to win it. There's still a lot of games to be played. But at this point, all we can do is judge off what we've seen. He's playing at an elite level. He's taking care of the ball. He's making huge plays. He's rebounding this team when they need it. He's stepping up when it matters. This guy is an NFL MVP. And I tweeted during the game, I've ripped Howie to shreds. You've been critical of Howie at times. I think everyone's been critical of Howie at times. It's not going to matter. The fact that he went and got Carson Wentz is really maybe one of the more amazing trades I've seen a general manager make in the last 5 or 6 years, in Philadelphia sports at least.
And as long as this run continues this year, I think you have to look at Howie Roseman as an Executive of the Year candidate because the Wentz move is transcendent, and it turned the tide of the entire franchise. But this rookie class, Matt Collins.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Matt Collins tonight.
He's exceeded Torrey Smith in targets the last 2 games. Seems like he's increasing his role. And it was a really nifty play design on that 64-yard touchdown. You go back and watch, Doug Peterson and Frank Reich kind of hid Hollins in a 2 wide receiver stack on the far side of the field with Alshon Jeffrey, and Hollins blew by him, blew down the field, he broke open, and Wentz hit him in stride for the touchdown. That was a huge play, and those are the kind of plays that are similar to what you saw from Hollins in the preseason. You saw it in the Green Bay game. He's been a fairly dominant player on special teams ever since the Eagles drafted him, and I think that's really what attracted them to him. But I don't think we're very far away from a day where you're going to see, and maybe it even happened tonight, where Matt Collins winds up on the field for more snaps than Torrey Smith, and he winds up being the number 2 or number 3 option on the outside.
Yeah, I would be surprised if Matt Collins starts, but I agree with you that we could very well be seeing a day soon where he gets more targets, gets more snaps. Because, look, I've been critical of the Eagles' outside receivers, I think fairly. Alshon tonight, let's see what he did. 2 catches for 37 yards. And when I asked for a bold prediction, I easily 50 or 60 fans tweet me, this is Alshon's breakout game. This is Alshon's breakout game.
I thought it would happen tonight.
Here's the thing. Well, whatever. We're not going to get into an Alshon debate right now. But he's just not a guy that's going to put up big numbers. He's only had over 110 yards and 2 touchdowns twice in his career, and he's played 40-something games, if not more. So he's just not a guy that's going to put up big numbers. But he didn't do much today. Torrey Smith didn't do much today. But I guess my point I'm making is the separation Matt Collins got on that long touchdown pass from Carson Wentz was maybe one of the more wide open, was the most open a receiver got tonight, I think. I mean, he had 2 or 3 steps on his guy, and these were Redskins cornerbacks that the Eagles receivers should have dominated. Their top 2 guys didn't get it done. Matt Collins came in and got the job done. And once again, Nelson Aguilar, big game, 4 catches for 45 yards. Not a ton, but he does have the touchdown and a long of 14. So I thought he was impressive tonight.
I agree. We talked about it back shortly after the Jordan Matthews trade. And I suggested back then that Matt Collins would be maybe not Jordan Matthews on steroids, but that speed and that size and those hands, he would eventually maybe not be an upgrade, but he would replace Jordan Matthews' production in the slot. It seems as though Nelson Aguilar is on pace to blow through some of those numbers. But I think Hollins, if Aguilar continues to thrive in the slot, I have no reason to move him to the outside. And I think that you look at tonight, 1 target for Torrey Smith. He didn't catch it. 1 target for Matt Collins. We know how it ended.
Right.
I think you are really on the cusp of seeing Matt Collins starting opposite of Alshon Jeffrey. And if you're going to get the kind of production you're getting over the middle of the field from Aguilar, from Zach Ertz, and you add in that speed element over the top, like we thought you'd get from Torrey Smith, but it comes from Hollins, that just raises the ceiling on this team this year and beyond, because Hollins is a homegrown kid, he's a rookie, and it seems like he's beginning to build somewhat of a rapport and a chemistry with Wentz.
Yeah, so before we get in the defensive side of the ball, let's talk about the rushing attack, because if there was one thing you kind of want to nitpick from this victory, I think it was running the ball. Carson Wentz has 8 attempts for 63 yards, so he ends up having roughly half of their 127 yards that they finished on the night. If you take away Wentz's attempts, the Eagles ran the ball 25 times for, off the top of my head, roughly 62 yards or something, 64 yards. So not great. I mean, LeGarrette Blount, 14 carries, 29 yards. He averaged only 2.1 yards an attempt, had a long of 21. So if you look at that, he really had 8 yards on his 13 other carries. He didn't seem in a great mood afterwards in the locker room. I saw him, I don't want to say storm out, but he was not in the mood to talk to reporters and didn't really give an excuse. I mean, he was not in the mood to talk. I don't know if he was upset about something else. I mean, there was a big win, but I think he was probably just frustrated in his performance. But then Wendell Smallwood, 8 carries for 25 yards. Corey Clement, 1 for 6. Kenyon Barner, 2 for 4. They really couldn't get anything going on the ground. And last week against the Panthers, one of the reasons that game was so close towards the end was the offense wasn't able to put the game away on the ground. They weren't able to do that again tonight. Now, they had a bigger lead, so it didn't end up mattering.
But let's go back to the second quarter real quick, because if you think back, it was 10-3, the Redskins were leading, and there was about 6 minutes left in the half, and the Eagles offense got the ball back. And if you think back to the first quarter, and maybe the part of the second quarter to open it up, they weren't getting anything done offensively. Mm-mm. And then I think Doug, it was almost brilliant. This little portion, this little chunk of the game, he deferred on the coin toss, which if you could put together a drive at the end of the half and wind up scoring and keeping the Redskins at bay, you have a chance for a 2-for-1, to borrow a basketball term, because you get the ball back to start the second half. They get the ball with 6:20 left. It's a short pass to Wendell Smallwood, and then 4 straight runs. So you shortened the game there. You shortened the amount of time in the first half where the Redskins had a chance to get the ball back, and that really is what ultimately set up the deep pass. You ran the ball to set up the pass to Matt Collins for the touchdown. I thought that was a turning point in the game. That series right there, where you could have continued to pass. The offense was herky-jerky at that point, but instead you decide to run the ball, keep it out of Cousins' hands. You get the touchdown. It's tied up at 10, and then you get the ball back again because your defense held, and you go into the locker room up 17-10, and you get the ball back to start the third quarter. So even though the running game might not have worked in the macro, in the micro, I think it really did a nice job of setting up the pass to ignite the offense.
Yeah, so on the defensive side of the ball, much like the offense, they got off to a slow start as well. Redskins have 102 yards of offense in the first quarter compared to just 29 for the Eagles, but they finished with just 344 yards. So the Eagles held them to 242 yards for the final 3 quarters. Kind of really controlled them. I mean, even though they ended up with 24 points, really, if you look at it, they had 24 points, but 14 after half, and 7 of those were when the game was basically decided. So they really only gave up 7 points that mattered in the second half. They really shut them down. But at the beginning of the game, I mean, Jordan Hicks goes out in the second play of the game. We'll talk about the injury to him and Peters in a few minutes. But I thought you really saw early on this team struggled to adjust to Jordan Hicks being out. You saw Vernon Davis have a few big catches. The play that Hicks was hurt on was a long catch down the middle of the field. Then they give up the field goal. Then the second quarter, they give up a touchdown. So they give up 10 points in the first half. The Eagles' offense bails them out a little bit. But I thought the Eagles' defense really got off to a slow start. What'd you think of the defense overall to begin with, and I guess how they finished? What are your big takeaways from the defense?
Yeah, my big takeaways tonight, Eliot, is that this defense was opportunistic and swarming at the right times. Those are my 2 words, swarming and opportunistic. You look at third down tonight, I believe at one point the Redskins were 0 for 5, and they were 1 for 7 after that to start the game.
Yeah, finished
on third
4
down.
of 12.
4 of 12. When you go 4 and 12 on third down, that means you're continuously giving the ball back to your offense. And we talked last week about complementary football and converting turnovers to points. Tonight, it was about the key tackles in the open field by Malcolm Jenkins, about Rodney McLeod sneaking up towards the line of scrimmage and making a tackle on 3rd and 1. Malcolm Jenkins doing the same thing against Jordan Reed. Those are timely plays that championship caliber defenses make. And you think back to last year, what were the big issues with this team? Third down and giving up X plays. The only X plays I really remember were against Kansas City this year, the Kareem Hunt big pass and run, and then 2 against the Chargers in the second half. But for the most part, they seem to have tightened that up. The pass rush, I thought, was really good. I think you're starting to really see Derek Barnett take on a legitimate role in this defensive end rotation. I have no real complaints about the defense tonight. I think that in a lot of ways, they kept them in the game when the offense couldn't get anything going in that first half.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the X plays. Vernon Davis had a 31-yard reception, but outside of that, no receiver on the Redskins had a catch of more than 20 yards. So they did do a good job containing those. You brought up Derek Barnett, and I think that's an interesting point because he's a guy that kind of got off to a slow start. I thought he had a few dumb personal penalties to start the season, but 2 sacks tonight was really dominant. I mean, even though he had 2 sacks, he was all over Kirk Cousins. I thought he really got to him a lot. So that was really encouraging to see if you're the Eagles. And again, the pass rush was there. I'll have to look and see how many sacks they finished with. But I thought they got great pressure on Kirk Cousins throughout it. And you saw it late in the game. They got the pressure on Kirk Cousins, and it resulted in that ugly. I mean, we want to talk about Carson Wentz's ability to take care of the ball. That interception Kirk Cousins threw to Corey Graham, and I think it was the fourth quarter, was very ugly. I mean, there was nobody really in sight. So the Eagles finished with 4, I'm looking at now, 4 sacks tonight, 2 for Barnett, 1 for Malcolm Jenkins, 1 for Fletcher Cox. And Malcolm Jenkins, you touched on it earlier, he's having an outstanding season. I mean, we do this podcast 2 or 3 times a week, and we talk about Doug Peterson, Carson Wentz, the receivers, the running back, the pass rush, the cornerbacks. We don't talk about the safeties a lot, and I think there's 2 reasons for that. 1, they're almost never an issue, so there's not a lot to talk about. But 2, when you look at it, Malcolm Jenkins, he's definitely top 3 player on the defense. He might be the most important player on the defense when you consider what's behind him.
He might be the defensive MVP.
He might be. Team. I mean, seriously, for everything he does, and he's strong against the run. He's strong in pass. He's a leader on the defense. He had a huge game tonight. He came up big on a 3rd down conversion, pass to Jordan Reed. It was 3rd and 1, and he kind of just stops him in his tracks after a completion, which is tough to do on 3rd and 1. Gets the Redskins off the field. He had a huge game tonight, and last year, 2016, Malcolm Jenkins didn't have a great year because they asked him to do a ton. They asked him to go up on the line of scrimmage a lot, and that's another way you're seeing Patrick Robinson have that impact. But tonight, I mean, Kirk Cousins is a guy that's really hurt this team in the past. He finishes 30 of 40 for 303 yards, 3 touchdowns. Does have a good game, but it really felt to me like a lot of that came in the first and fourth quarter. I thought between the second and third quarter, this defense really stepped up when the offense was. I mean, obviously, one of his 3 touchdowns, 1 was in the first and 1 was in the fourth. That last one didn't really matter. I mean, that game was over at that point. I thought Cousins played okay. I think he didn't play as well as his numbers indicate. And I thought the Eagles' defense did a better job containing him than those numbers indicate.
No, I agree. And I think that the one area that we haven't even really touched on as far as the offense goes, red zone efficiency.
Yeah,
this offense struggled last year in the red zone. How many times do we talk about them not being being able to punch it in and having to settle for field goals. They were 3 for 4 tonight, and they've done a really nice job. And I think a lot of that has been the emergence of Zach Ertz. And Ertz now leads the NFL among tight ends with 5 touchdowns, leads the Eagles receivers with 5 touchdowns with another one tonight. And he had a really nice game. And I know that there was this rap on Zach Ertz that he wasn't a physical player, and I just don't buy that. I think that he's become a really complete tight end in terms of his run blocking. You look at 5 catches on 5 targets, averaged 17.8 yards per catch, had the 46-yard catch that had about 16 yards after the catch, and a touchdown. The Wentz-Ertz connection is powering the offense.
I think they're the best quarterback-tight end duo right now in the NFL.
They're up there. You can make a case for Brady and Gronk. You can make a case for Alex Smith and Travis Kelce, but long-term, they certainly have the brightest future.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Brady and Gronk have accomplished a ton, but just with Gronk's injuries, he's kind of in and out of the lineup. I mean, I will say this. No tight end has caught more passes from a quarterback since week 1 last year than Ertz has from Wentz. So they're extremely productive, and last year what's always really held Ertz back was the touchdowns. But this year he's got 5 in 7 games. He's on his way to a Pro Bowl year. So, the defense was impressive. The offense was impressive. One thing, though, we have to talk about, and this is going to end up being a bigger deal than fans might want to think about right now with the excitement from the win, the injury to Jason Peters and the injury to Jordan Hicks. After the game, Jason Peters was not in the locker room. Doug Peterson said he didn't really know at this point, or at least he wasn't ready to say. Jordan Hicks was in the locker room. He was walking with crutches and a boot on his foot, so it does not look good. I will say, and I'm sure you got the same feeling from talking to players in the locker room, they weren't talked about like guys who are going to come back anytime soon. I mean, players talked about these as upsetting injuries, about injuries that are unfortunate, injuries that, upset them. So I think that you're looking at both of these guys being out. I mean, I would be surprised if Jason Peters took another snap this year in an Eagles uniform. We'll see going forward what that means for him. And as for Jordan Hicks, just my initial reaction would be maybe against Dallas in Week 11, but he very well could be out for the year. I
think it's pushing Eliot. He couldn't even put any weight on that right leg at all. I know they announced it as an ankle, but he had a calf injury coming in. That looks like it could be one of those combination bone/soft tissue injuries. I mean, it looked like in coverage that his foot just either got stuck on the turf or his leg just gave out. And that's what led to the big completion on that play.
Yeah.
But, I want to give the Eagles defense a little bit of credit here. You saw early on Najee Good got beat on the first touchdown, I believe it was, from the Redskins. Never had his man coming out of the backfield. And you could kind of get the sense that the Redskins were going to attack the middle the rest of the night, and they were just going to exploit that, and that was going to be a trend for this team and a worry for the rest of the year. But I thought that Jim Schwartz did a nice job of taking away the middle in the second half because Cousins couldn't feast in the absence of Jordan Hicks. And if they can survive Hicks's absence, if they can somehow piece together that offensive line, which I think is an even bigger issue, losing out on Jason Peters, then they're going to be okay. But I think that those 2 losses and how they overcome them, it's going to define their season. Because we can talk all we want about the high ceiling for Carson Wentz. We can talk all about the fact that they're now 6-1, and by every metric, they're the favorite in the NFC and to win the division. But you're talking about losing 2 of the top probably 15 players on this team, maybe your best defensive player all around, possibly your second most important offensive player. Not many teams can survive those sort of things. And this team has survived a lot. We talked about it at the top of the show. Adversity in many different ways. These might be their 2 biggest obstacles to accomplishing what we think they might be able to accomplish.
Well, let's go through them each briefly. I mean, right now it's Monday night. Doug's going to talk later in the day. On Tuesday, he'll give more information at that point. We'll have our reaction show with Joe Giglio. I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about then. But just quickly, let's go through each one. So Jason Peters, I talked to Halapuli Vaitai after the game, a name that I'm going to have to learn to spell at this point.
Halapuli,
yeah, I've tried to get away with it. I copy and paste it. I Google it. I'm going to have to learn it at this point. But he told
muscle memory, my man. Muscle memory.
Yeah, I can't spell to begin with. But all right. So he said that he's been practicing at both left and right, which we knew. He said he was comfortable at both. Last year he played when Lane went down. He played right tackle. Jason Peters played all 16 games last year, so he didn't play any at left. Now Doug said after the game he wasn't sure if he would move Lane to left tackle position. They do see him eventually taking, but a position he struggled in during the preseason when he did play it. And I think at this point, let's just assume Jason Peters is out for the year. If I'm the Eagles, I put Halapuli Vaitai at left tackle. I leave Lane at right. I don't want to move 2 spots because then you have to have Lane adjust to the left and you have to have Vaitai come in and adjust. I leave my 4 as best I can. You finally have some continuity with Steven Wisniewski. I put Vaitai in, and I just hope. I mean, Jason Peters was playing at a high level. There's no getting around that. I thought Vaitai played better as the year went on last year. It's tough to tell what he was in training camp. I thought he had a decent preseason in terms of the games. Thought tonight he played okay. It's tough to watch offensive line live sometimes and tell, but
I think you're going to have to give him help.
It's a big injury, though.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to see, and you're going to have to play a lot more 12 personnel, and you're going to have to play Brent Selleck in a lot of two tight end sets, putting him out there alongside Vaitai, particularly in running situations, until you can get that confidence going that Vaitai is dependable out there at left tackle, because I think long-term he's much better suited to play right, but I'm with you. I don't love the idea of weakening yourself at two positions, because right now Lane Johnson is probably one of the top two right tackles in the league, but you move him to left tackle and all of a sudden you're taking him out of his
You're average at both spots.
Right. And I think that you just need to figure out a way, whether you leave in Wendell Smallwood to chip as a running back, whether you want to go ahead and put Selleck out there more often, but you got to give the kid help. But I don't think that you move Lane Johnson at this point unless it's absolutely necessary.
And the other part of this is we're just talking about the starting five. Vaitai was really their only backup tackle. I mean, Isaac Seumalo can play tackle, but he struggled at this year, as we know. I think Wisniewski can't play tackle. I mean, they don't have another backup tackle. They have Dylan Gordon on the practice squad. So I think they're going to go out, and whether they place Peters on IR, I would assume that's what they're going to end up doing. They're going to add a veteran backup tackle. I would be surprised if they added a starter. I do think Vaitai will start, but the need for a backup is just as big, because if Vaitai or Lane go down, I mean, let's be honest, Lane's a guy, he had a concussion. He hasn't been the most consistent presence on the field. You need a quality backup. So I think that's a roster move that's going to be coming. But let's talk about Jordan Hicks really quick before we wrap this up. Obviously, I mean, look, I've said it. I think Hicks at times is the best player on this defense. He struggles to stay healthy, and that is one potentially good thing about this is the Eagles are used to playing without him. This is the third game this year he's left and hasn't finished. He left against the Giants. He left against the Panthers, and now he left tonight. Joe Walker, I mean, I'm going to have to go back and watch. I thought Joe Walker played pretty well tonight. I agree early on they attacked the fact that Hicks was out, but I do think the Eagles' defense settled down a little bit. Joe Walker's a guy, 7th-round pick in 2016, tore his ACL last year, didn't play, didn't have a good preseason or training camp in my mind, but they kept him because they do like him as a pure middle linebacker prospect. Obviously, with Kendricks, he could end up playing more depending what his health is. He also didn't play tonight. The Hicks injury is a big one, but I think they're better suited to cover the loss of him than they are Peters, just because you can move things around a little bit more at linebacker as opposed to this tackle is going to be out on an island.
You can't hide a left tackle.
No, you can't.
You can hide and you can overcompensate for, and if Michael Kendricks gets healthy, you can play him and move Nigel Bradham inside. You can hide the loss of Jordan Hicks, which I think they did a nice job of in the second half. You're not hiding a left tackle. Go look at what's happened with Eric Flowers in New York. Go look at what happened last year with this team when Lane Johnson was out. I think Vaitai is certainly playing at a higher level now than he was as a rookie. But bottom line is, Eliot, you're going to have to give him help over there.
Yeah, and so, I mean, as positive as this win was tonight, as exciting fans and the team is that they're 6-1, these injuries are big, and they're things we're going to write about going forward, the things we're going to talk about on the next podcast. So if you're listening to this for the first time, this is the No Huddle Show. Please go subscribe. We really appreciate all the subscribers we've gotten since the start of the season. We appreciate your 4-star reviews. Matt,
Five-star reviews.
Man, I'm tired. Well, what I was going to say though was we're up to an average of 4.5, so we're slowly getting there. And if you remember last podcast, I said I wanted to get to 200 reviews by the time we get to Dallas. We're at 147 right now. So we are getting there. We're getting there. I think we'll be there by Dallas. So go subscribe. We're on all your favorite podcast apps. You can find us wherever you want to. We'll be back on Tuesday. We'll be doing this with Joe. We'll probably post it Wednesday.
Yep.
But so we'll be back, and there'll be a lot to talk about with the injuries and everything. We'll have a lot up on the site on Tuesday morning, so we appreciate the listens.
Yep,
Matt,
make sure you go follow Eliot at Eliot
right.
Shorr-Parks. Follow me on Twitter at Matt Lombardo PHL. Eliot, it's been a fun first 7 games.
Really has been.
And leading into the midway point, week 8 against the 49ers. This is going to be huge, and I think we're going to really see this team, this stretch leading up to Dallas, and with all the injuries, we're going to see if they can really take that step towards locking down the division.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be the difference between 10-6 and 13-3.
I agree.
Just seeing if you can win these games. So, all right, let's get out of here. I think they're starting to close the lights out here at the link. Matt, we will record this Tuesday. We'll have it up for you guys. I'll talk to you soon.